Hello, everyone. Welcome to this very special episode of Americans Learn. Since you've been with us, we've been following the introduction and lead up to what will be the eventual conflict between the United States and the Empire of Japan. This video is titled Attack on Pearl Harbor, and I'm joined here today with my colleague, Daniel Lupker. Daniel, welcome to what's probably going to be the most significant episode in this series that we have been watching from Kings and Generals.
Yeah, it's all the energy we've been watching build up is going to culminate here, where Japan makes a move that's not going to play out well for them after making other moves that put them in a position to make this their best move.
I also want to add on here too that this is, a day that eventually would lead to the United States to become, or will build up to the United States becoming a global superpower in the aftermath of the Pacific War. Now, for many, this video, especially for those who had relatives or ancestors that were at Pearl Harbor, this might be a difficult video to watch. But I encourage everyone to learn about this, and please support the original content creators, Kings and Generals. A lot of effort has been made to put as much information into these videos. I have learned things that I haven't known before, and seriously, support their work. And let's all just understand about this horrifying attack. And what we can learn from it as well. So, Daniel, if you're ready on your end, unless you have any kind of comments you want to share.
Let's do it.
All right, then, folks. And since I'm in charge of the ones and twos, let's pull up this video and watch Attack on Pearl Harbor.
As we've seen in the previous episodes, the Japanese Empire had decided on war with the West since the embargo enacted by the US in July 1941. The plans to simultaneously execute invasions on the Dutch East Indies, the Philippines, and Malaya, as well as a preemptive attack on Pearl Harbor to destroy the American Pacific Fleet, had all been drafted back in September, with preparations carried out successfully by late November. By the way, don't forget to check out our podcast on the Pacific War. It has all the episodes in a long-form format with extra details. The link is in the description. If there's one item the historical lead of the Kings and Generals channel considers indispensable, it is the Ridge wallet, made by the sponsor of this video, Ridge. With Christmas.
Now, look, please support the original content creators. Obviously, the sponsorship of this is probably expired. And Daniel, as you have said before, they may not like us, doing this. So there you go. So let's go ahead. So please support the original.
And by them, we actually have about a year ago, we got permission from Kings and Generals. The ads. Just want to make sure we clarify the noun.
Yes, exactly it. So there you go.
No, Kings and Generals like, how dare you guys?
How dare you? How dare you? No. But seriously, Kings and Generals, they're doing great content, and I really respect their work. I'm also reacting to their work that they did with Julius Caesar and his campaign in Gaul. Hashtag Julius Caesar is a hero. Never mind. All right, let's go ahead and enjoy the rest of the video.
The United States, meanwhile, was also well aware that war was imminent, engaging in negotiations with Japan to delay this conflict as long as possible for their forces to adequately prepare. But on November 26th, the main Japanese strike force, under Vice Admiral Nagumo Chuichi, had already left its base heading to the Hawaiian Islands. Thus, time was running out for the United States. In Hawaii, the principal objective of the attack was Pearl Harbor, the main naval base for the Pacific Fleet of the US, because of its geographical advantages, making it perfect for accommodating large warships and aircraft carriers. The Japanese planned to bombard these ships using dive bombers, high-altitude bombing, and torpedo attacks.
By the way, I just want to make one thing clear. There's that movie that came out called Pearl Harbor. starring Ben Affleck and a few other actors. Right now, their names are skipping my mind. I'm so sorry. I'm not. I guess I'm not as hip and cool as I once was because I'm forgetting their names now. But I know Ben Affleck was in it. Let me just make one thing clear here: the attack at Pearl Harbor happened like in the wee early mornings. No one was kind of out. It was kind of a very lazy morning, and plus, just there's just a lot of a little bit of some inaccuracies in that film.
What
Just
a Hollywood film not being accurate to what actually happened, but done so they can fix other stuff that don't really have any bearing on what happened. I'm shocked.
yeah, I know. I'm shocked too.
I mean, can you imagine if they made a movie about a Western advisor going to Japan and depicted Meiji as a wimp?
Oh,
I mean, I can't imagine them doing that.
they would never do that. Seriously, I mean, in concept, Last Samurai, I think visually great film. It has some merits, but overall the accuracy
Yeah, they
on
did.
Meiji, they did my boy wrong. They did my boy Meiji wrong.
So Kit really got me onto the Meiji thing. But yeah, if you made 2 changes to The Last Samurai, Meiji is a Chad.
Yeah, he wants industrial. He doesn't want to listen to his old mentor and be like, yes, we must go back to no. He was like, man, forget that.
Second, the samurai were the first people to adopt the firearm. They just ran out of gunpowder because they didn't have sulfur.
Exactly. Gee, like maybe you shouldn't close off your ports. Then you have some sulfur then. So there you go. Just throw it out there.
That the destruction of these vessels would be enough to render the Pacific Fleet inoperative. That's why they didn't target the submarine base or the oil yard that were also present in Pearl Harbor.
Big mistake.
This attack was so important to get an early win in the war that the planners had gone to the extent of preparing mock-ups and models on which the pilots could practice maneuvers, so much so that thousands of hours of airtime were spent in charting out the perfect plan of attack, while the Type 91 torpedoes of the era were modified with wooden fins to be effective in shallow waters. Yet the plan of Admiral Yamamoto Isarashi...
So, like, I remember, like, in Pearl Harbor, they can't torpedo us. It's too shallow. And the Japanese are like, well, we'll add fins.
Yeah. We'll try out something else here. So there you go. So obviously we're gonna get the background to Admiral Yamamoto. And I just got to say, in regards towards military commanders, he understood the power of the United States and its capacity for industry and its ability to arm itself in a conflict. He understood the bigger picture. Now, I'm not going to make him into this, somebody who was like for peace with, because let's face it, he rose to the rank of admiral. So obviously he's going to stand with his nation. He just saw the bigger picture, and he was against originally, any kind of real military attack. He was kind of like, maybe we should go back to diplomacy before we ruin all of our credibility. But oh wait, we had some geniuses already throw that out the window, huh?
And then I just want to throw out there, for those of you that have not heard of this person, he is epitomized by the cannon in StarCraft 2 that the cattle bruiser uses.
Yeah, the battle cruiser. Yeah, the Yamamoto battle cruiser. Yamamoto, I heard of that before. I heard of that name before.
You get the Yamato cannon.
Yeah,
that's him. That's the guy that this is named after.
Also had some flaws. One is that Pearl Harbor was a naval base, so rescue services could be quickly mobilized, and many sailors would be on shore leave, thus reducing the amount of possible American casualties. Another drawback was that the American ships were moored in shallow waters, so most of the destroyed vessels could be salvaged and repaired with comparative ease. But the most important disadvantage was that the 3 aircraft carriers of the Pacific Fleet were absent from Pearl Harbor on the day of the attack. This was something that the Japanese...
That is the most saving grace right there for the United States. The fact that those 3... I think 3, and there's a 4th one being repaired somewhere. The fact that none of those aircraft carriers are there is what saved our rear ends. That was like a stroke of luck, Thank goodness that they were not there. It's the best thing ever.
Command knew, as many spies had already acquired detailed reports of all vessels and schedules at Pearl Harbor, but they decided to attack anyways, even
Oops.
though these carriers were one of the most
What's up?
I just said oops.
important objectives
it
of
was
the
a choice they
operation.
made. I'm sure they're balancing the fact that if a single U.S. fishing trawler's in the area, the surprise attack is very public.
Yeah.
But their highest priority was the aircraft carriers for a reason.
Yeah. Yep. And the thing is, what's interesting to point out is even during the war, the United States was constructing more aircraft carriers, as Japan, would later on lose most of its entire fleet with the aftermath of this attack.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, in the American base, Major General Walter Short and Admiral Husband Kimmel were concerned about a possible attack on Pearl Harbor, believing that they could be subjected to a naval invasion or a sabotage operation. In that regard, all Army aircraft were bunched together for more protection at Wheeler Field, although this also made it an easier target for an air attack.
Oh yeah. Pause
Munitions
that right
were
there.
secured,
Very
coastal
symbolic.
artillery was put on alert.
Hold on. Say that again.
Very symbolic of the American response. You know who we have to stop and protect these airplanes from? Not the Japanese Navy and their planes, but the Japanese civilians on the island.
Yeah, and look, here's the thing. And the aftermath of this attack, many Japanese citizens who left the Empire of Japan to become citizens here were wrongly imprisoned and put in camps, and were wrongly vilified. Again, with the aftermath of this attack, because again, I just want to point out, and this was mentioned in Ken Burns' documentary, but another documentary series that I've seen before too. There was one, I think, an army unit or battalion or regiment made up of entirely Japanese Americans who.
Oh yeah, they fought in Europe.
Yeah,
I've heard, weren't they the most decorated in World War II?
I thought they. Oh, okay, I thought they fought in the South Pacific, but I guess they fought in Europe. So I stand corrected on.
They did not want them to fight the Japanese.
Yeah. So okay. So I stand correct. Hey, folks, please let's if there's anything that Daniel and I have missed, please share it. Let's in the comment section below. I'm very curious to hear your feedback. So if you're sitting down joining us, please give us your feedback.
Carriers started to rotate in and out of harbor, and ships and naval aircraft started to patrol in search of submarine threats to shipping. As their preparations show, they were definitely not expecting an air attack. On December 2nd, while cruising onwards, Nagumo received orders to start the final preparations for the attack on Pearl Harbor, scheduled to commence 5 days later. Although the Japanese commander was worried that they might encounter American ships on their way, none came, and by December 7th, the Japanese task force had finally reached its destination. Pre-dawn, the operation began with Japanese midget submarines starting to stalk some American minesweepers that were on patrol, attempting to shadow their prey into the safety of the harbor while the anti-submarine net was open. Meanwhile, Nagumo ordered the first wave of aircraft to prepare for takeoff at 06:15. Commanded by Fujita Mitsuo, the first 183 planes then steadily took off from their 6 aircraft carriers, some 250 miles north of Oahu. At 06:30, they adopted V formation and headed southwest towards Pearl Harbor.
Man,
a couple of minutes later,
I gotta say, because I've played a little bit of Medieval 2, Total War, Warhammer 2, Total, and it's one thing seeing like your ground, like if you're facing off against a swarm of enemies, it's one thing, but them coming from the air, I only can imagine what it was like seeing that happen. What a nightmare scenario that would have been for anyone that was there at the time. I had a friend who I served with who told me that his grandfather was on watch, I think on one of the boats that got destroyed at Pearl Harbor, and he was, because he was supposed to be relieved, and he told that guy hey, wake up, you're supposed to relieve me, and he walked off ship because he got relieved, and honestly, if his grandpa stayed there, he would have been dead.
Wow.
Yeah, I know, crazy, man, just stroke of luck for some people. So there you go.
Some Japanese submarines were discovered, and one was sunk by the destroyer Ward, in what would be the first shots of the Pacific War. Around 0700, a radar post on the Opana Ridge identified a group of more than 50 aircraft 132 miles north of Oahu, and then notified headquarters, which didn't receive the message because the personnel had left for breakfast. At the same time, Nagumo ordered...
You never abandon your post! You just don't do that!
Well, radar wasn't proven back then, so no one really understood. Well, that's not... Well, the British had proven it.
No, yeah, the British had proven...
But that made them not gotten all the way to the Pacific Ocean.
Well, here's the thing. That person went to breakfast, right? So the thing is, obviously, if you're doing posts like that, there should be another person there, like rotation. Like, okay, hey, Johnny, I'm going to go get my breakfast. You man the post. All right. Or use it. I'll get you your breakfast so you can eat it here.
Yeah, I'm not sure it was the same site, but maybe it was another radar installation. They'll probably get into it. But like someone's like, hey, there's a bunch of planes in the radar. That's just our planes. Don't worry about it.
Are you sure? Because they kind of look a little different.
So it seems like even if they were there, it may have not mattered.
I know, but still, it's just like one of those things like, hey, Billy, you sure that's ours? Because I'm looking out the window. Like, granted,
looking at the dots, and they're coming from that way.
That way. Yeah. What's going on here?
Did the 168...
Did the planet shift on its rotation? Is up now down? Is down now up?
8 aircraft of the second wave to take off, commanded by Shimazaki Shigekazu. Commander Fujita then sighted the northern shore of Oahu at 0740, relieved to see no enemy aircraft in front, and subsequently ordered his pilots to deploy into attack formation at 0749. Because of a misunderstanding of his orders, both the dive bombers and the torpedo planes simultaneously commenced their operations. Wheeler Field, one of the main objectives due to the concentration of most of the American aircraft, was first systematically bombarded by the dive bombers and then repeatedly shredded with gunfire by A6M Zeros. Most of the planes were completely destroyed as a result, but 12 pilots managed to get their fighters to lift off and engage the Japanese in dogfights. Meanwhile, torpedo forces split into 2 strings, with 16 planes closing on their targets northwest of Ford Island, and with 24 planes going south to Hickam Field and Battleship Row, intending to attack enemy battleships and aircraft. Some 11 fighters also turned east to attack Kaneohe, arriving at 0753 and completely neutralizing the American aircraft there. At the same time, the Ewa Marine Air Corps Station came under attack by 8 Zeros, leaving behind Wildcats blazing, scout bombers burning, and utility aircraft destroyed. Pearl Harbor itself was finally attacked at 0755, 6 minutes after the assault commenced, and the Pacific Fleet would be caught unaware with a rude and violent awakening. As dive bombers started their bombardment over Hickam Field, torpedo planes nosed down on Pearl Harbor, leveling and dropping their deadly loads into the water. Northwest of Ford Island, the ex-battleship Utah and cruiser Raleigh reeled under torpedo explosions, while to the south of the island, the 1010 Pier experienced a slashing attack in which the cruiser Helena was hit. On Battleship Row, the battleship Oklahoma was the first one to get hit by torpedoes at 0757. At this point, alarms had been sounded, and men started to pour from below decks to man the anti-aircraft guns. Soon after 0800, the Oklahoma received 3 more torpedo hits that left her capsizing, while the battleship Arizona was attacked with armor-piercing bombs that penetrated the deck and caused small fires. The repair ship Vestal nearby was also hit by these bombs, but it continued to fire against the Japanese planes even while engulfed in flames. And behind the Oklahoma, the battleship West Virginia was hit by 2 bombs that caused serious fires, and by a total of 7 torpedoes that opened 2 large holes and caused extreme damage. While on the other side, the battleship California was attacked by torpedo bombers that managed to hit her around...
What's up?
Is they're hitting all the stuff that was important in the last World War.
Yeah, all the battleships. So, anyways, with the aftermath of this attack too, it showed that the battleship was antiquated. It was no longer the groundbreaking piece of machinery that was once so revered and respected. It was now cast aside. I mean, look, you know what? In fact, you know what? I take that back. The battleship was made antiquated or made irrelevant with the destruction of the Bismarck, which was the largest battleship of the time. And what took out the Bismarck? It was airplanes.
Yeah, and that fun fact, the Bismarck as a super battleship was actually the smallest super battleship made in the entire war.
Oh, really? It was? I didn't know that.
At the time, it was the biggest because of the treaties on how big. Basically, everyone had a treaty that they were following on how many battleships they could make.
Right.
And Germany's like, I'm going to break the rules and make one that's bigger.
Yeah.
That was it. But then once the war happened, everyone's like, I'm also not going to follow this and make a battleship that's bigger.
Yeah.
So Japan's two battleships were bigger than the Bismarck. The American super battleships were bigger than the Bismarck. They were just the ones that broke it first, and they only were bigger because no one else had broken the rules at that point.
Exactly.
0805, tearing two huge holes that started flooding. As the Oklahoma capsized, Arizona was hit for a fourth time at 0806, piercing her forward magazine and causing such a powerful explosion that a fireball erupted from the ship, tearing her in half. Vestal's fires were suddenly extinguished due to the concussion, but oil from the ruptured tanks of the Arizona reignited the repair ship a couple of minutes later, forcing Commander Cassin Young to ground the Vestal. The West Virginia was also set on fire by fuel leaking from the destroyed Arizona, and she would end up sinking due to the damage. 429 men died that day in the Oklahoma, while the Arizona suffered 1,177 losses, including its two leading commanders. This was more than
half the casualties, two ships.
Wow. And again, it's just the amount of destruction that's taking place. And you know what's interesting too is that I know that other videos have done more detailed onto this, but the attack of Pearl Harbor, there was a lot of warning signs given in advance to, I think, Operation Secret Services, which was the predecessor of the CIA at the time. They were told, like, hey, something's going to happen. We should be looking more into this. Maybe we should disperse the fleet. We should do things. No one heeded the warning. No one heeded the warning at all. And I can't help but just think what would happen if things were done differently. If maybe nothing, if all the ships were not put in such a perfect target. But I could see where people could let their guard down in Hawaii, because again, Hawaii wasn't as, I guess, developed as it was at the time. And I mentioned in a previous video that my great grandfather was part of the expedition in Siberia, part of the Trans-Siberian Railroad, and I think he was part of the Eastern division, because I remember seeing letters. I would not remember. There are letters of him in Hawaii, and Hawaii looks completely different than how we see it today. I mean, there's hotels and cities and towns all over. So I could see where people could let their guard down in Hawaii. I mean, it looks so peaceful and quiet there.
And then just to say, so like if you're from the American point of view, you think it's really shallow. There's no torpedo technology that can hit these ships. Not a big deal. Japan they would never come after us. Not a big deal. We're so far out that we'll definitely hear if they're coming way before they do. And we have these little radar things that'll give us advanced warning, and that'll get passed up the chain real quickly. And like America was like, I feel like they felt about as ready for war as you or I would if Chicago got attacked right now.
Yeah.
And half of the total number of casualties the US would receive in this attack.
There you go.
At the same time, a recon squadron of SBDs coming from the aircraft carrier Enterprise, some 200 miles west of Oahu, arrived at the battle and was quickly engaged by the Japanese. But its efforts couldn't prevent their enemy from destroying half the aircraft at Hickam Field.
Yeah. And by the way, just to pause it one more time.
Around 08.
The Japanese have a really good nimble airplane.
Yeah, the Zero. The Zero is a is a frightening piece of machinery.
Very, very little damage will take it out, but it is so maneuverable, especially if you don't have experience, and especially because the Wildcats just weren't anywhere near as good. Like the dive bombers were somewhat capable of, but not if they had a bomb on them. And forget the torpedo bombers that basically were just one-wing World War I airplanes.
Yeah, exactly.
10, one of the torpedo bombers managed to hit the battleship Nevada, causing minor flooding, but at the same time getting shot down by the American gunners. 10 minutes later, after some relentless bombardment and surrounded by the fires of the...
You got to imagine also that, like, once everyone's at battle stations, just what we're seeing right now with the number of ships, that's probably, like, I don't know, 1,200 30 cal machine gun emplacements.
Yeah.
That are just going to start bristling everywhere.
Yeah. Again, fire and ammo, not good bedfellows.
Arizona, the battleship Tennessee was hit by 2 bombs that luckily didn't cause serious damage.
What was that?
Can you imagine how much less effective the attack would have been if the radar, when it was picked up, someone was there and it got relayed and everyone took it super seriously, battle stations were called, and just if nothing else happened, everything else was the same except every single machine gun emplacement was manned.
Oh, and wait! You got to add in one other thing here too. If all the machine guns are manned, you know what that also means? All pilots are in the air too.
I know. I'm assuming that if we pretend that doesn't even happen, I'm saying if it was just the machine guns, because you got to imagine each of these ships have like 50 of them.
Well, yeah, but I mean, obviously, if everyone's manning, then someone's gonna wake up the pilot and be like, "Hey, sir, you might want to get your happy butt in your cockpit."
No question. But my point is that if you just had people manning all the machine guns that would be right there, it would have been a lot harder to attack.
Yeah.
Just even if you, like I'm saying, if you handicapped it and didn't even include the planes.
Yep.
Actually, I think if you had all the planes up in the air, it might have even been harder for the machine gunners to shoot. Friendly fire.
I mean,
no one knew what they were doing.
Yes and no. I mean, obviously that would be a factor in, but I mean, obviously the planes would have to be in the air, and if the planes are already in the air, they're probably maybe trying to get at a higher altitude to, because if the Imperial Air Force is flying in and they're assuming that everyone has their guard down, they're not going to be thinking like, oh, maybe we could be jumped up from the air. So there you go.
And they have to be low and slow anyway for torpedoes.
Yeah.
Although fragments of the bombs were sent flying and ended up killing Captain Mervyn Bennion of the West Virginia. Around 0830, Japanese aircraft identified the remaining battleship, Pennsylvania, undergoing a refit at Dry Dock Number 1. And then started to bombard it for the next 15 minutes. Although one of the bombs caused large fires on the destroyer.
I remember I saw a chart somewhere where Japan had like a hierarchy of targets.
Yeah.
Number 1, carriers.
Yeah.
Number 2, cruisers. Number 3, battleships. All the pilots were like, that's it, I'm going after the battleships.
Well, yeah, because the carriers weren't there. I mean, the cruisers were there, but battleships, I mean, obviously they're bigger targets. So
like the battleships were all like World War I era, from my understanding, and all the cruisers were newer.
I think that's audience. Please
correct me if I'm wrong.
Audience, hey, come on! Now's your time. To
tell us we're wrong. You guys are wrong. Here's why. Here's my sources.
There you go.
Destroyers Cassin and Downs nearby. The Pennsylvania only got hit once and suffered no serious damage for it. At the same time, Shimizaki's second wave reached the coast of Oahu, but waited for the given command to attack. And at 0845, the California was struck by a bomb that started serious fires and caused considerable damage, although she continued to resist for the next few hours. While the Japanese planes made their last sorties with less intensity, the Nevada managed to control her flooding and then started to get away from the row. Around 0850, a momentary pause in the battering occurred as the second wave was ordered to commence its operations. Thus, over the Koolau Mountains, 78 dive bombers advanced directly towards Pearl Harbor, intending to continue the bombardment of the American vessels. Meanwhile, 18 bombers and 17 fighters attacked Kaneohe, and 27 bombers and some fighters took a wide sweep around the south of the mountains to attack Hickam Field. By 0900, the reign of death had resumed, but this time the US forces were determined to offer more resistance. On Kaneohe, the bombers made strikes on the hangars and managed to explode one of them, while their Zeros continued farther south to Bellows Field, shredding with machine gun fire the enemy aircraft there. On Hickam, the Japanese resumed their bombardment over the field, but were met with considerable opposition, so they continued towards Iwa and Wheeler. The main attack also resumed over Battleship Row, hitting the battleship Maryland at 0908 and causing a small flood, although she would continue to fight for another day. Around 0920, Pennsylvania's dry dock was also hit again, finally exploding the destroyers there and causing severe damage to the battleship. But the strong American resistance forced the Japanese aircraft to target whatever ships they could.
I'm not sure you can see because I can't put my cursor on yours, but you see at the top right, there's like 12 ships sitting right next to each other at the very top.
Yeah.
No one's taking them out.
Yeah,
putting it out there.
I mean, I think this is still the first. This is the second wave, and
this is the start of the second wave.
Yeah. Okay. So,
There's like a group on the top left and the top right, and also you could see in the bottom right, there's like a group of like 8 or 9 ships that are kind of all grouped together.
But also in the top left area too, there's some ships that haven't been hit either, like right around here. So here,
that's what I'm saying. There's everywhere.
Left,
they're literally
right
only taking out the ships that are like they're just going after the battleships.
Yeah,
it's like okay, you've killed a lot of people and taken some of the least relevant ships out for this war.
And honestly, even then, this attack on Pearl Harbor, when we have to look at it, this isn't even the full force that Yamamoto wanted. He wanted more ships, more aircraft. He wanted even send in ground forces to occupy Hawaii, because he said when designing this plan, we need to go all out to really get to really make a significant impact. And obviously, the attack on Pearl Harbor was devastating. But it wasn't the amount of resources Yamamoto wanted, I think purposely because he had rivals in the Admiralty and in the Army, they didn't want to give him the whole shebang.
And then the other thing I never got was when they're retreating back to Japan after this, why not take Midway? There's like 30 people guarding it.
Oh, that's a good question.
It has like what is it actually going to cost you? Just as you're passing by, you have a new island to be able to come back and attack Hawaii sometime in the future, and you deny the Americans a super west-facing island.
Yeah.
It's like 10 people there.
Big mistake.
Seeing more attacks over cruisers and destroyers, and not over their real objectives. So in the end, the second wave would be much less successful than the first one because of this fierce opposition. Around 0950, however, the Nevada would be struck by 5 bombs as she steamed past the 1010 pier, thus suffering severe damage, although she would manage to safely return to shallow waters. The California would also succumb to its damage around 10, so her crew would have to abandon her and she would finally sink over the next 3 days. Commander Fujita would be the last aircraft to remain in Hawaii while he conducted his recon and assessment flight over Oahu, finally returning around 1100 hours. When he reached the aircraft carrier Akagi at 1300 hours, his report
Admiral, we did it. We took down all the battleships. Did we get anything else? We really didn't touch it. We got some aircraft. We blew up some landing strips, but the Americans are not good at like getting resources to rebuild things, so we're okay.
And Admiral's like, idiots! I'm surrounded by idiots!
It's like...
Yeah.
Yeah, they took out the battleships.
Yeah, I mean, but again, this was a significant loss of life too.
Yeah,
and it's just again, when you look at the attack on Pearl Harbor, if Yamamoto, I gotta say this is like one of those what ifs. Like, what if Yamamoto did get his full force that he wanted? Would we have seen the Imperial Army land in Hawaii? Would we have seen a ground engagement? Now I know that in the South Pacific there was battles fought on American soil, but that was when Alaska was still a territory, the Aleutian Islands, of course. But how crazy or nuts would it have been if there was again conflict on Hawaii, and if it was further intensified? Let's say Japan stayed there longer. If that would have been probably more devastating, because the United States would have lost a key piece of land and territory in the Pacific.
And again, that's what I was saying. It's at least take Midway, at least. And then the other thing I'll say is, it just seems interesting. Every time America loses about 3,000 people to a surprise attack, we end up killing 1 million people. Just putting it out there.
Dissuaded Nagamo from ordering a third wave directed against American infrastructure, like the submarine base or the oil yard. He decided this because they were running low on fuel, and because they had lost the element of surprise. But this would prove to be a very bad decision in the future. The operation, however, was considered a huge success in Japan.
It was a risk.
And also take the risk. I've always felt like you're already there. Sure, you've lost the element of surprise. Sure, you'll lose more planes. It's really hard to stockpile oil in Hawaii.
Yeah.
Maybe those Americans that are really well known for fixing stuff and being really good with machines, maybe take out the repair yard, the third wave. But he's like, we're running low on fuel. Well, good news. This attack has given you so much more fuel consumption. You just don't realize it yet.
Yep.
Damaging or sinking all 8 battleships, among other vessels, damaging or destroying 219 American aircraft, and causing 3,497 casualties on the US with only minimal losses. Consequently, the Japanese had acquired naval superiority in the Pacific and could then continue with their plans of expansion. But before the smoke had drifted away in Hawaii, the American sleeping giant had awakened, ashamed and angered, and it wanted revenge. The Japanese war declaration had been...
Look at, they're heading right past Midway.
Yeah, they are. Huh. Interesting.
Scheduled to reach Washington before the attack on Pearl Harbor, but delays in the decodification and transcription of the message caused it to arrive 1 hour after the attack had commenced. The following day, FDR would then give his famous infamy speech, taking the role of the innocent victim and targeting Japanese treachery to urge Congress to declare war on the Empire of Japan. Thus, the Pacific War had begun. This week, we will cover the Japanese offensive directed against the resource-rich British colonies, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see it. Please consider liking, commenting, and sharing. It helps immensely.
All right, so yes.
I'm really interested in the next part because I don't know a whole lot about... I know that Japan, in lightning speed, took out most of the Southeast Asian islands and continents and stuff, but I have not seen it happen. So I'm very interested to see how that all played out.
Yep. And again, folks, be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Americans Learn. That way you're made aware when we upload new content onto this YouTube channel of ours. And please be sure to support the original content creators, Kings and Generals, because they're doing a lot of great work. Obviously, there's a lot more that we're going to learn about in regards towards the war in the Pacific. So please stay tuned. Thankfully, there will be a plethora of videos for us to watch and learn from, and give us your thoughts and feedback in the comment section below. Let's all be polite to each other and get our learn on here with Americans Learn. So I'm Kit. This is my friend Daniel. Take good care of yourselves, folks. We are out of here.
See ya.